Thank you for joining us in this week's Astro Chat. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion and would love to hear about anything that resonated with you. Keep the conversation going by posting shareable content on our Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube pages. You can also email us at astrochatpodcast@gmail.com. AstroChat is uploaded every 2 weeks on the Saturday before each new and full moon. Look for us on your favorite podcast platform as well as on YouTube. You can support AstroChat and receive exclusive content by donating on our Patreon page. We look forward to chatting with you all again at the next lunation of the moon. Welcome to Astro Chat with Anne Sundell, Kimberly Williams, and Monica Anna. We are 3 professional astrologers living in 3 separate countries, coming together every new and full moon to share our 3 points of view on astrology. Whether you enjoy deep dives into the current transits or you are just beginning to learn about astrology for the first time, there is a place for you here. All that is required is an appreciation for astrology, along with a respect for the various traditions within it. So grab a mug of coffee, your favorite cup of tea, or any other beverage of your choice, and join us for a chat on the astrology of the next 2 weeks. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another Astro Chat. Today it is myself, Kimberly Williams, and my cohort, Monica Anna, and we send a big shout out to Anne Sundell, who will hopefully be joining us in 2 weeks when we come together again. Today's episode, we are focusing on the upcoming new moon in Sagittarius. In fact, that will be happening here in Central Time Zone of the US at 5:31 in the afternoon. Across the pond over in the UK, that's 11:31 in the evening, and in Finland, 1:31 in the morning of the 13th. Now, if you're on military time or you live somewhere other than our 3 countries, I leave it to you to convert that. The new moon is going to be at 20 degrees and 40 minutes of Sagittarius. And we're looking at the window from the 12th of December to the 27th of December during this episode. That's when we'll have the next full moon, and we'll come back with another episode to talk to you about that. Some highlights that might be important for you, especially if you're familiar with your chart, that you might want to look at is during this 2-week window is the sun will begin its journey of this period in Sagittarius, but it'll ingress into Capricorn on the night of the 21st here and the morning of the 22nd over in Europe. Mercury is going to be doing an exciting retrograde dance in Sagittarius and Capricorn. We're going to be talking about that in depth in this episode. Venus is trucking along through Scorpio for the majority of the month. And similarly, Mars and will be trucking through Sagittarius. So not a whole lot of changes of direction or anything to look at there. Jupiter is retrograde for this month in Taurus from 7 degrees to 5 degrees Taurus. And Saturn will be in those early degrees of Pisces, right? We've been talking about Saturn and Pisces for a while. It's moving slowly from 1 to 3 degrees. Uranus is retrograde one more time from 20 degrees to 19 degrees. And Neptune just turned direct before this episode begins and is barely moving. So she's hanging out at 24 and 25 degrees of Pisces. And lastly, Pluto is traveling during those last 2 degrees, 28 and 29 degrees of Capricorn, going to be hanging out there until the end of next month. And if you're like us, we were talking pre-episode how Pluto is quite intense during these last 2 degrees. So you may be feeling that energy as well. I think that's our bulk of where the planets are. We're going to highlight a few of them. And before we do that, though, Monica, why don't you start us off with talking about the Sabian symbol?
So yeah, Anna, our Sabian symbol expert and specialist, can't be here, but we're going to dive into that ourselves. So Sagittarius 21 for this lunation is a child and a dog wearing borrowed eyeglasses. So it's really interesting symbol. And at first, it kind of looks a bit whimsical and a bit playful. And it is. At the same time, there is this kind of flip between the playfulness and, um, sometimes, we need to play a role to actually fit into that role. This kind of idea of fake it till you make it. It has a place in our lives. Sometimes we need to try on, kind of play pretend, try on different roles to see which one fits. Um, but very often we can stuck in that play pretend mode and make that persona a reality. And we have this situation where, there are the false impressions that we give off, or we meet with. There's this idea of blind leading the blind, and not seeing past that playful persona that kind of was supposed to bring something from us, but fossilized and became us.
Yeah, that's a really good description of it. When you first read that out to me, I was a little taken aback with how to interpret the human and the dog with the glasses, but I think that makes sense. And this idea of, the blind leading the blind, and also since it is a moon in Sagittarius, this whole idea of what's going on with perception, our perception of things. Like we may feel that we're following an expert, but are we seeing them clearly? We may feel that we're being ourselves, but are we really bringing ourselves forward? Or as you said, are we fossilized? So yeah, I think that's a really good metaphor, a really good image to hold on to during this particular lunation, and it's fun. It is something I think having a good sense of humor can be very helpful as we're battling some of the heaviness that's also here.
Well, we're going to be diving into probably this one a bit more as the episode unfolds. But what you just brought up, with the obviously new moon in Sagittarius, Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius, is actually known for good humor, for being that kind of jovial, again, the word linked to Jupiter, jovial person. So there is this kind of, playfulness and laughter and the belly laughter with Jupiter and Sagittarius. And what you've mentioned as well is the idea of a teacher and a guru that sits within the Sagittarian realm and theme. So again, this idea of, are we looking at the gurus and can they, like, for me, the true mark of spiritual teacher is, can they laugh at themselves? Do they actually have a sense of humor? This is really for me make or break of whether or not I consider that person a real teacher or not, because there's so much fossilization when you think you're bigger and or someone else that you are. The laughter can basically shatter that illusion, shatter that structure that you're building. But there's, if you are truly authentic, that's it. The laughter is just there, you know. So it's interesting. Again, those false impression, the blind leading a blind. How often in sects and certain kind of groups that's been created by people with the bad intention, right? We are led by someone that we trust, we believe, and we believe in that playful persona that they're putting out there. But the reality behind this is completely different.
Yeah. So I guess that takes us into talking about the fact that the moon, as we mentioned, is in Sagittarius. And if you listen to some of our past episodes, we've talked about new moon in Sagittarius a couple of times. So feel free to go back and check that out. So I'll keep this a little shorter than perhaps those episodes were. But for me, the big thing, I love the new moon in Sagittarius every year. For me, there's this sense of visioning, not the way we vision when we're in Piscean realms, when we're in that watery, trying to receive. This is much more of I'm creating my vision, getting in touch with what are my passions? What is it that stirs me? What is it thinking about Sagittarius energy? What is it out there that I want to go discover? There's such a push with Sagittarius energy to see what we don't already know, to broaden the edges of our envelope, to get outside the gate, outside the corral. What is the horizon like beyond the horizon that I see? That is where there's so much excitement, be it around travel, be it around philosophy, be it around what I'm learning, what I'm teaching. What is it that we get passionate about? And on a new moon, as we've mentioned so many times, this is often when the seed is being planted. This isn't necessarily when the whole idea and construct has flushed out. This is that beginning point of a lunation. It is that spark, that moment of what is it within me that's yearning to come forward, to come out. And so having a new moon in Sagittarius, and of course it falls at towards the end of our year during the holiday time, it is a great time to really think and feel and be inspired. But what do I want to do in the coming year? What is it that I'm yearning to move towards? Not planning for it, right? We talk a lot when we have the Capricorn lunations, we'll talk about that follow, we'll talk about the planning side of things. This is the more unstructured, more wild, hedonistic, abandoned, be a maenad. What is it that I'm just excited about? And if, like many of us, you've been dealing with not feeling the passion, the excitement, if a lot of the transits, the life events hitting have been heavy, this can be a great time to kind of rekindle our fire, our passion for being here, to remember what it is that is excitement that got us started before we became overwhelmed with the work, you know. So yeah, that's for me is always the standout. There's so many things we could say about Sagittarius energy and about the new moon, and I could talk for hours about it. It's such an amazing, vibrant, powerful, fiery sign. But for me, the biggest thing about a new moon in Sagittarius is this idea of feeling what it is that inspires me and often connecting with something I don't already know or that I'm learning to connect with that is taking me beyond what is already the known world of my universe. So what about you, Monica? What do you love about the new moon in Sagittarius?
I mean, everything that you said, everything that you just said, and the horizon, the passion, experiencing something new. I always say, for me, Sagittarius is linked to that word foreign, foreign land, foreign people, foreign experiences. Everything is so distant from the place where I grew up, or where I understood, because I absorbed the culture, the language, the cuisine of the place, and everything that is so different from me. It's enriching, isn't it? Like that's what it is for me. Sagittarius is, you're exploring a new horizon, but new horizon means something unknown, something foreign. That's why I always go back to that word, because if you grew up, and never left that valley in the mountain, that horizon behind the mountain, you don't know what there is. It might be an ocean, it might be a sea, it might be another metropolis. It's something completely different to the life that you have here in that little enclosed village in a valley in the mountains, right? So Sagittarius shows us a different horizons and shows us the places that are beyond something that we know, we understand, and we feel comfortable. This is the sign that goes, let's go on an adventure and let's go beyond our comfort zone. This is not a sign that goes, oh, this is comfortable. That's more Taurus thing, like I feel comfortable here. Why would I go? Or at least if I'm going, I'm bringing sandwiches. um and Sagittarius is, like you say, I always say Sagittarius and Capricorn, it's such a lovely end of the year, because with Sagittarius, it's that idea of, bringing the holidays and bringing the food and, and reviewing the whole year behind you, but not in that, goal oriented way, like you say. It's more like there's this excitement, the new year, something new, something exciting, something that I don't know yet is around the corner. There's a new moon, there's 365 days of possibilities, there's something new and exciting just around the corner. So this is the time when you let go of everything in Scorpio. You've let go and kind of cleansed and, packed away for winter. And this is the time sitting by the cozy fire type thing. And like, oh my God, what is it, the new thing that comes through? With Capricorn, you will then start planning. So with Capricorn, it comes the element of I need a structure for that new adventure. I need to know how I'm getting there, the plane, the train, on foot. What do I need to bring? That's the Capricorn side. That's the structure side. That's to make sure that we're getting there. But the spark of our goals, the seed is planted at the new moon in Sagittarius. One thing that I tend to do for myself, and sometimes in a workshops as well in the new year, is the whole idea of goal setting. And I think, again, when we're understanding astrology, we're understanding how we can set those goals that are meaningful to us. Just setting a goal, I want to, win a gold medal in Olympics. Well, that's great. That might be a goal. If it doesn't have that passion of Sagittarius behind it, if you haven't dreamt about the Olympics is in 4 years, for example, and I can see myself on a podium in that, exercise or whatever I'm doing. If you don't have that passion and that fire, that goal will be absolutely meaningless. And I think this is I always say understanding of archetypes and how they fit within one another really does help in everyday life. If your goal again is to go back to the gym in January, which so many people tend to have, I'll start something new, something healthy in January. Again, what is the vision? What is the Sagittarius vision? Do you want to start the goal of going back to the gym just because? Or do you want to start that goal because you have that vision of, I don't know, walking up the Kilimanjaro mountain or going for a trek across US, and you need that stamina and fitness to do that? That Sagittarian passion will feed your Capricornian plans. So this is the time to have that, to have that, like you say, not the Piscean dream, but that vision of where is it that I want to go? The whole idea of manifestation, if you will. This is the moment of dreaming about where do you want to be next year at the same time. So this is what I tend to do at the new year in Sagittarius, just, writing in my journal in 2024, in December, I will do this, or I'll achieve that, or I will be there. Just having something that keeps me going. I think what it's linked to Sagittarius as well, just like the last thing that I wanted to mention, is hope.
Yes.
For me, with Jupiter and faith, we tend to forget that Sagittarius and that vision is what drives us because it gives us hope. It gives us meaning. When everything around you feels awful and distraught and dark and, those dark clouds, tapping into that Sagittarius vision and that fire, if you really understood that archetype and worked with that, that really can help us through those moments because we have that vision of, I don't know, better future, better me, or not even better, different, right? It doesn't have to be better or worse. It's just like I have a vision of, that I want to aspire to. Again, those words that we don't tend to use anymore, the aspiration. This is Sagittarius, and this is something that can give your life meaning, even in the darkest of times and the darkest of places.
Yeah, and that's the analogy I always love with Sagittarius is, with the fire signs, it's like Leo is the big blazing bonfire on the beach, and Aries is often the spark. I think of 4th of July sparkers or the flint rocks that start those
Mhm.
sparks. But Sagittarius for me is, taking the candle to that light, and that's the light in the darkness, and then leading the way, taking that light out into the dark. So how do we find our inspiration? How do we illuminate what has been hidden previously? So yeah, it's a great time of year. And little plug here, if you don't already have a copy of the Astro Luna journal written by our amazing Monica, Anna, this is a great time to get it because new moon in Sagittarius would be a perfect time to begin writing in that journal. Just saying.
It's such a lovely way. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that plug. And uh, I wouldn't be myself if I didn't do it. It's available on Amazon and in a local store, bookstore next to you. So yes, thank you for mentioning that. You've mentioned one more thing about that light. I did a workshop, classes around archetypes and landscape, the internal landscape. And one thing that we picked for Sagittarius was the bushfire. It's the idea that little spark, that airy spark can lit up and spread so wide and so quickly. You don't know how to control that. And interestingly enough, Sagittarius energy is linked to idea. You can't extinguish an idea. You can't kill an idea. An idea can spark a revolution. Again, just going back to, we're talking so much about Pluto offline as well, and Pluto cycle, and where Pluto was 250 years ago, and kind of that cycle started. The idea of revolution in France, those three words that 250 years later we remember. It's that idea, it's that very Sagittarian spark. There is an idea, there is a moment, and you can't extinguish that fire. Once lit, it will spread. And interestingly enough, Sagittarian archetype is very often linked to riots and uprising, because it's that fire, that wave of of a bushfire that just collects people and lifts them up. Again, the hope of something new. So thank you for mentioning that. This is what I love about our conversations and why we started that back, oh my God, now 5 years ago, right? Those meetings, not the recording, that came later, but those meetings about bouncing off the idea, sharing idea, that's how
Mhm.
Sagittarian is that as well. That's
Yeah.
a great time to actually have, new moon is a great place to have conversation, to expand your horizon. I mean, these days I'm afraid to even advise that to a clients or friends, because we're also easily triggered around certain topics that, the discussions turn into arguments. But Sagittarian really at the core is, I don't understand you. Tell me what you mean. Tell me where you're coming from. Tell me your side of the story. Again, it's a storyteller sign. Tell me your story. I'd like to understand. I'd like to put myself in the shoes in your story. Again, story is such a powerful way, and again, linked to Sagittarius and Jupiter, such a powerful way of spreading ideas. We don't learn by a kind of dry technical text. We learn by storytelling.
So true.
Thank you for lighting that spark in me. I mean, if you can't tell, yes, I am a big fan of a Saturn, but I do love my Jupiter in Sagittarius.
All right. Well, let me pull up the chart and we can start talking about some of the aspects that are happening, what is going on with Sagittarius, Jupiter, and the other planets. All right. So here's our lovely chart for December 12th. And I think, Monica, you're going to lead us off talking about some of the wonderful soup.
Yeah. So the soup of lunar aspects. We have obviously moon and the sun together in Sagittarius at 20 degrees. And right on their heels, we have Mars, 13 degrees Sagittarius, conjunct by 7 degrees. We also have sun and moon squaring Neptune at 24 degrees of Pisces, trining North Node, and obviously by default sextiling the South Node, which is just opposite the North Node, and quincunx Uranus. So at first, I remember when we were chatting about this lunar soup, I was like, "Oh, that actually feels really nice and uplifting." And then we uncover some more aspects, like maybe not so much. So as much as I like the new moon in Sagittarius and everything that we've discussed about that this theme, obviously different planets have something to say, and when they connect to the new moon, they're bringing their own energies. It's like, if we only had Sagittarian people in a party, it would be a different party. But when then you bring a Neptune person into the house and Uranian or Martian, you beginning to mix those different energies, and then the party can get out of control or become very boring. Depends on the energies that we're mixing. But I think from when I first looked at that, I think what I said to you before we started recording, that it felt like, and I know it will sound so dramatic, like there is a element of spiritual crisis within that new moon. So we're talking about Sagittarius, we're talking about beliefs and meaning and what gives us meaning in life. And again, Sagittarius is linked to teachers and faith, right? And that new moon is squaring Neptune in Pisces. So again, it's creating that tension to a Neptunian Pisces. So again, the delusion, illusion, the fog, the dissolvement as well. Neptune in Pisces dissolves things. So is it a question of, having that tension between what is meaningful for me and what is it dissolving in front of my eyes? So things that I might have faith or believed in, whether it's in my family, in myself, or maybe out there in the world, you believed in political system, you believed in a guru, you believed in your teacher, you believed in, I don't know, in politician. And suddenly in front of your eyes, you're going through a crisis because that delusion is no longer there. That false, again, going back to our Sabian symbol, that play pretend is becoming obvious. So it might be, it's a tension, it's a crisis situation. So it might become obvious. And then there's this dissolution of, I don't know what to believe anymore. I thought he or she was the good guy, And we have also that quincunx from Uranus. Again, it's that lightning rod that comes in, and with the quincunx, it's that idea of this uncomfortable tension that you can't scratch, it's there. So how do we handle that?
Yeah, I love your analogy of spiritual crisis. I think also in addition to that, there can be confusion. Like sometimes one can be in a crisis and not realize it. It's one thing when something is coming at us from outside and we see it. There's a financial crisis. There's, something, I'm getting laid off from my job. It's pretty obvious. But what
Mm.
happens when it's more about one's belief or internal guidance? Sometimes we don't recognize that things are breaking down, thinking about that Uranus energy, that things are breaking down. And you mentioned before we began a great analogy that things break along the stress lines. They don't just break randomly. So maybe where there has been stress, where there have been issues of doubt, of not so sure, but I'm sticking with it. I'm staying the course. I'm holding on to my beliefs, but maybe those beliefs have begun breaking down. And I feel like with Neptune being kind of the square to that lunation, that what is it that was my fantasy may become a lot more visible. And how do I move forward thinking about the Sagittarius pole? How do I move forward? The way to do that may not be clear because of Neptune. So there can be escapism. This is just too hard. I don't know. There can be just such overwhelming confusion. I don't know what is the right step to take. And often that can push us into the I need to figure it out mode, which this is not the energy of figuring it out. This is the energy of being the visionary, of feeling the feelings, as we said when we began.
Mm.
And then there's that Uranus. And for me, when you have something making this aspect, it's almost an opposition, but not quite. It's like something that is over here that in your that quincunx, it's in your peripheral, but you can't see it unless you turn your head. So for me, it's the adjustment aspect. Something needs to change, thinking about Uranus's energy. I need to make adjustments in my life, and this requires a change in where I'm stuck, right? It's in Taurus. So the way I have done it is not the way I'm going to do it going forward. And I'm not going to get out of this tension unless I'm willing to turn and look at my resistance, perhaps, which can be a big Uranus and Taurus theme. Where am I resisting change? What is the change that I am resisting? What is the change that feels, because this is a new moon and feelings could be really heightened. What is the change that just feels so scary or feels so overwhelming or just feels so dangerous? And is that part of the resistance? So I kind of feel like if we can work with Uranus and bring it into the equation, bring it into our visual sight, our consciousness, then we can work through that tension with that Neptune and not have it be the I need to escape or I'm overwhelmed choices, but maybe some of the changes I need to listen to my spiritual self, my higher self. I need to step out of the ego realm. Maybe it's about not taking action immediately. Mars, as you mentioned, is coming in to make a conjunction. And I think you had looked it up and we said that Mars will actually be at 20 degrees 40 minutes later in the month on the 22nd of December. So right after Yule, after winter solstice, we're going to see that perhaps then we'll have a better idea of what is the action to take. But if we're trying to force ourselves to move too quickly right now, we might, miss the mark.
Yeah. I mean, I like what you're saying about the Uranus, and Uranus is that energy of lightning. What I was thinking as well when you were talking about this Neptune and not seeing it for the first time. Sometimes it's that energy of freezing, isn't it? People say fight or flight, but actually it's not fight or flight, it's fight, flight, or freeze. There are three responses to that. And Uranus very often indicates that crisis or that trauma that freezes us. It's
Hmm.
that trauma that froze us in the moment, and we're 40, 50, 60, but there's this element of frozen trauma from when we were 2 or when we were 11. This is kind of Uranian energy as well, that moment of that. It's a lightning, but it's that moment of that frozen absolute fear that goes through you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And then you don't even know what to do. And I think, again, this the idea of delusion or seeing something, very often when we are in those situations, when we start seeing things for what they really are, you have that shock, that happens in relationship when suddenly, that person that you think it's the best person in the world turns out to be, sociopath or psychopath or narcissist, or, just a really, really mean, mean human being. And you're like, that moment of freezing, like, how could I not have seen it? Like, that mask drops, and it's like, oh my God, you're not who I thought you were. This is Neptune in Pisces, suddenly delusion, like, sorry, disillusion of that fake identity happens. And again, it happens in our relationships, it happens with our friends, it happens at work. Oh my God, this is great company. It's like, oh, that's what's going on behind it.
Hmm.
What do I do? That happens with our political views. That happens with our spiritual views. The teacher, the guru, the community that we belong to, the political party that we belong to. There is this crisis, there's this moment of test with Uranus, and you can see through that fake reality into what's really behind it. And there's this moment of, I froze.
Yes.
I actually don't know what to do, because, again, going back to Sagittarius, everything that I believed that gave meaning into my life was connected to that. So this is the tricky bit to unravel. This is the tension between, how do I unravel the meaning, the faith that I had in those figures, in this system, in this way of thinking or living, and how do I then rebuild that just by the strength of my own faith? Again, going back to Neptune in Pisces, by my own faith, but my own spiritual connection. How do I tap into that core within me and take that projection onto others within, so I can build that from within? It's not
Yeah.
an easy thing to do. And this new moon is really, really, I wanted to say inviting us to do that, but it's not an invitation. The Uranus is there. It's just like, it's the lightning rod. It's like, it's there. Deal with
Yes.
it.
Yeah, it feels a little, to sound dramatic, it sounds a little like do or die, kind of like, this must
Yeah.
happen. And I want to state that this is not the first time, right, that we're dealing with Uranus in Taurus. It's retrograde. So we've been here before. It's been transiting through Taurus since 2018. Like, chances are that what we're feeling on this lunation, it's just another round of something we've been feeling. We've been feeling the nudge, and then the nudge became the push. And then maybe we took a few steps and then we went back and then we've resisted. So it's not new territory, but I think it could be healing territory, like as opposed to just being caught up in it, because in addition to all the aspects you mentioned, the byproduct is that Uranus and Neptune are also in sextile with each other. And so this could be saying that something that's been very unconscious, that's been hidden from our view because it's been happening back here, this might be the time where that comes forward. What is the old trauma? Would be a question I would ask myself that maybe stopped me from developing the beliefs that I need for guidance now. If we're trying to go forward, but I don't have the belief system I need, I might go back to, well, what was it that created some type of challenge or chaos or fear the sky is going to fall? That put me into that freeze mode. Maybe we froze when we were younger and we haven't moved beyond that. So healing old wounds that are more like old trauma that have become very unconscious patterns rather than what we see manifesting in our life, can also be really powerful during this time.
I mean, is I love that you mentioned that actually this is, this is not new. This is not the new moon. And I think this is actually, thank you for bringing that up, because again, it triggered my process of thinking. The new moons and full moons, they're like those little waves that's coming and going on the beach. But there's this whole hum of the sea or the ocean that is going in the background. And, what we're going through at the moment are huge changes within astrology. We have Pluto that will change, sign, and has not changed sign in the last 20 years. So you have that, um, the underlying kind of, music, if you will, and then obviously what's happening on top of that. So, you have Pluto that's changing sign. You have a Pluto that's moving to a new sign that has not visited for 250 years. We have other, obviously over the last 2-3 years, we had other changes that were significant: 200-year changes, 150-year changes, 800-year changes. So the cycles that's been going on for hundred of years, or 10, or decades, they shifted. So we're in a really concentrated period of time where a lot of clocks changing patterns. And those new moons are like that little kind of spike of activity. There's this hum underneath and there's this spike of activity, but it's ultimately linked to what's going on underneath. And we are talking about the new moon and full moon in those episodes. But we're very aware of that underlying, I can think of like a band, when you have the bass kind of giving you a rhythm, and then you have, I don't know, sax or like a really nice piano doing the whole thing, on its own, but still having that rhythm dictated by that bass player. And that's kind of how I feel with the full moon and new moons. We're bringing a new kind of quick energy, but that underlying theme, that underlying archetype, that underlying energy is there. And like I said, the changes that we're going through in the last 2-3 years are massive.
Yeah, and that was a point I wanted to tap into, is that not all of this energy is about long-term things. Some of this could be,
Mm,
what have you been dealing with since
mm,
2019, 2020, and beyond? We've all experienced major change, and we may have developed some associations that change is bad or painful or traumatic. Change for a lot of people involved loss, not just because of COVID, but economic things that have changed. The production chain has changed, political landscape has changed. We have wars that are happening, around the globe that are like, you can't put on the news and not have a moment of, or longer, in my case, of deep, overwhelming sadness. And when is it going to shift? When will it get better? Like, is a very pervasive viewpoint. And going back to that Sagittarius energy, that what is going to give me hope, optimism? How do I become more enthusiastic that the future is not going to be a repeat of the last few years? And so that finding those things that help sustain us and keep us buoyant, finding the maybe the triggers that keep us stuck in some negative types of mindset. Like these can also be really useful tools to tackle, to dive into during the end of this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it's something that we've talked offline as well when we're talking about spiritual crisis. You know, again, it doesn't have to be personal. It's not me. It doesn't mean that suddenly, something's wrong with you. We live in a lot, in times, like you say, when there is a war going on in so many places, when there is a genocide happening again in few places, not
Yeah.
just in one, when we have volcano erupting, when we have people being displaced because of either big corporations going into their land and mining for resources, or because of the climate change. We have people so polarized at different spectrums of political views and every other views, that ultimately we are living through a traumatic time. This is not just me having a trauma when I was 5 years old. We're literally living at the moment in an environment that is so toxic that to stay healthy, it just kind of it's nearly a miraculous thing. So let's not forget, there's so much discussion around, again, mental health, and it's so much, for me, mental health again is linked to Jupiter and Sagittarius, and finding that meaning in life that we can hold on to.
Mm.
And these days we need to also just I think have kindness to ourselves as well, knowing that mental health is not just about you and your own health. You cannot be healthy or stay healthy if you are living, or existing in unhealthy environment. This idea, if you're living in a toxic wasteland, no amount of meditation, or headspace, applications and everything else, or yoga will help you if you're literally living in a toxic wasteland. And it just feels a little bit like we're going through a wasteland. We're going through really unhealthy, mythologically speaking, unhealthy landscape. This is me just referring again, Dr. Sharon Blackie, and her idea of that, King Arthur and obviously Holy Grail trip, and going through the wasteland when the king is wounded and is unhealthy, and everything is a wasteland. It just feels a little bit like that. So the question on that new moon in Sagittarius is, what are you holding on to? What gives your life meaning? And what is the idea, the spark, the vision that can light you up and start the little revolution, whether within you, within your own home, within your own community, within the world?
Yeah. So true. Nothing like a light and fluffy lunation.
I know.
All right, so
I know.
that's our lunar soup. Now let's stir the bigger cauldron, because
Yeah.
we've got some interesting dynamics happening with Mercury at 8 degrees of Capricorn, Venus at 9 degrees of Scorpio, Jupiter at 6 degrees of Taurus, and Saturn at 1 degree of Pisces. And so if you think of this as like a big, huge pot, a big cauldron, the handle, I think, is Mercury. Because, well, one, is placed kind of in between the others, but also Mercury's the one that's going to be going retrograde. It's going to be doing her dance. Mercury goes retrograde hours after this lunation. On the 13th, Mercury will go retrograde at 8 degrees of Capricorn. Later in the month, on the 23rd, I think it is, she'll retrograde back into those last degrees of Sagittarius and stays retrograde there until the new year. So we're looking at early Capricorn, late degrees of Sagittarius, this reviewing. For me, Mercury retrograde is always the review. What did I say? What did I not say? Who is saying what to me? How do I think about that? What are the plans I've made? What are the projects I started and didn't finish? Where do I need to edit? What do I need to review, revisit, revise, redo? And so there's this energy, and with her being in Capricorn, a lot of this energy is going to be about our physical world, our material world. What do I need to revise around my leadership, about those who have leadership over me, whether that is in a job, whether that's in the home, right? What about being parental with myself, with others, others with me? What about my goals? What about the career? What about my status? What about my reputation? What about the paycheck? Again, looking at and revising, like, where are we at with these things? How do we feel about them? And kind of the brass tactics. This is often a time where we take the rose-colored glasses off, or at least we want to take them off and really look at the hard line about things. Where have we succeeded? Check. Where have we not? Minus. And yet that's not happening alone. It's happening in this cauldron with Venus and Jupiter and Saturn. So if we just think about that analogy of the rose-colored glasses, glasses have been coming up throughout this podcast, starting with our Sabian symbol. There's a sextile to Venus. So I want to put those rose-colored glasses back on. I don't necessarily want to look at the hard line of what is working, what isn't. And yet she's in Scorpio. So, but I want transformation, but I want it to feel good. I want transformation and I want the rebirth, but I'm imagining as Venus and Mercury are talking to each other, it's like, is there a way that we can skip over the death to get to the rebirth? Yeah, how do we make it feel softer? How do we make it more palatable? How do we take our medicine with that spoonful of sugar so it's easier to get it in, to get it go down? And this could be saying too that there are either people in our lives, thinking of Venus as relationship oriented, or that there are things that bring us pleasure that maybe we need to intertwine in with the taking the hard look so that, we have a harsh experience, but a soft landing rather than just kind of beating on ourselves. On the other side, with that Jupiter and Saturn, both of whom are also aspecting not only Mercury, but they're also making contacts to Venus, right? There's this desire to expand everything right now. Jupiter in Taurus is is there and retrograde again this month, and there's this energy of, I think, what have I wanted to grow and it didn't grow, and where do I invest my time and my energy back into expanding and making things feel bigger? And since she's talking to Saturn, some of those ideas that we're expanding may be things that feel a little harsh, like, how come I'm not making my dream, the Saturn and Pisces, the Pisces side, how come I'm not making my dream my reality, the Saturn side? And so there can be a whole lot of revisiting the what has worked, but I think a lot more focus on what has not worked and maybe questioning ourselves about, is this a fantasy or is it possible to make my dreams a reality? Have I been maybe fooling myself? Have those rose-colored glasses led me? We talked a lot about how in 2020, so many people left jobs either by choice or were forced, but started new ventures, started new things. Is that working out? Is that panning out? Is that the way I wanted it to be? I recently watched a YouTube video that was really good. And they were talking about what is the difference between having a hobby and having a uh, entrepreneurial online second career business. And is it a hobby or is it a business, and kind of the differentiations there. And it felt like somebody stripping my rose-colored glasses off and making me take a hard look at things. So yeah, I think there's a lot that we could unpack with these four players, but I'll pause there and leave space, Monica, for you to talk about what they mean for you.
Well, I was just looking as you're talking as well. I was just looking that, we have planets either stationing or actually being retrograde. And at this new moon, the Mercury is actually stationing just day before it will move retrograde. Um, and one thing that again we mentioned when we were chatting earlier on before we started recording is that this time it just feels like you're stuck in a mud or a swamp. You're trying to move forward, but your legs are stuck in that mud or that swampy soup that just drags you in, and it just takes an effort to get the foot out of that, and then you're taking a step and your foot again sinks into that. And it feels a little bit like that with all those planets either stopping or being retrograding or changing direction. It feels a little bit like there is no movement forward, there is no direction forward. It's just like you're just stuck. You want to go, but your legs, are not moving. And again, at this new moon with the Mercury being, just day before turning retro, it feels like this is like you're just saying, this is not a time of putting plans or goals. This is time of reviewing. Again, just going back to that, those questions about what have meaning in my life. What is it that I still believe, what is it that keeps me going in those darkness? Mercury can actually help you review that, review the past year, see see the good stuff that you put in and created that structure. But this is not a time to use Mercury to set the goals for next year because things will change. The moment Mercury will go direct in January, we'll have a fresh perspective, we'll have a fresh goals. January will be great time for setting goals. But not yet. Um, I was just thinking about again Mercury in Capricorn stationing, this idea of, again, like we were talking earlier about freeze. This is the moment when we freeze, when something drops, the curtain drops, we see beyond that false mask, and we freeze. And Mercury, the quickest of the planets, literally the quickest of the planet, right? In
Yes.
a horoscope, the god who had those, winged shoes, who could travel, between heaven and earth and underworld, it freezes mid-flight. So again, this is like the symbolism upon symbolism from whichever angle we want to look at it. There is this element, we're just going to get stuck. And it's the moment that, what, maybe we need to allow it. Maybe we need to allow to see the sheer um awe of that lightning, or the sheer horror of that lightning to really, really struck us in order to move forward. Because I think the worst thing that we could do with that new moon and that energy is just to turn our eyes away and say, I haven't seen it, and it's possible, again, with the Neptune in Pisces that we've discussed earlier, it's possible that we just don't want to see it. The mask drops. No, 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 everything is fine. It's the Lego movie. Everything is awesome. I'm awesome. Everything is awesome. My partners is awesome. The world is awesome. Everything is awesome. But sometimes we need to see that kind of not dressed sheer strength of that revelation. I want to use the word revelation because it's such a powerful world with Sagittarius and Uranus energies. The one thing that I'm also thinking, again, with Uranus and connection to Venus in Scorpio, is going back to our Sabian symbol, the idea of a dress up. Oh my God, Venus loves the dress up, right? But also the idea of false impression. And Venus in Scorpio can be a master manipulator. This is the propaganda speaking. This is the false information speaking. This is me pretending to be someone that I'm not. This is the deliberately fooling other people with false impression. It can be a weapon, it can be a means of seduction. I mean, it's Venus in Scorpio. that might be the seductress coming out. I'll lead you with those false impression, promise that I'll make your dreams come true. But this is where, and I'm using that word specifically, propaganda is so alluring, because it's, giving you that impression of that your dreams can come true. What you think, like, it's really here, it's like the magician. Look at that, I have that rabbit out of the hat, and you're getting bought into that. So I'm just thinking again with that, with those 4 players, like you say, there is this element of, do we have situation where, with Mercury going retro, not going forward, right, and Venus being in Scorpio, again bringing the element of toxicity. Scorpio's linked with toxicity, with secrets, with sexuality, with violence, with taboo. Is it something that we don't want to see? Mercury is going backwards. It doesn't want to see the conversation with Venus. I don't want to see the taboo, the falseness behind what you're trying to present. So we're kind of going into that realm, like the Sabian symbol says, of blind leading a blind, not growing up. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. I'm turning around.
Yeah.
But the beauty of the Mercury is it will lead us back through the same path to say, look. So it's again up to us to see, can I use this time to reflect and really go into what's happening? Do I actually understand what's happening around me, within me? Where is that faith, that true core, again, going back to Sagittarius and Jupiter, of faith and my understanding and meaning in the world? And where is it that I'm being fed false impressions?
Mm-hmm. And as you were saying that, I keep seeing the scene from The Wizard of Oz. That idea of, you know, putting your faith in someone else as the great guru, the great leader. The great Oz is on the big screen, but it's a little person behind that's actually operating, and that person doesn't have the answers. It's creating this whole illusion. And then at the end, they tell Dorothy, but you had the knowledge, you had the wisdom all the time. Like, you had what you needed to get home. Click your shoes and believe. And so as you were talking, and I'm remembering that scene, I'm looking at these planets and I'm thinking, perhaps this takes me back to where we started with the sun and moon, new moon, making a conjunction with Mars. And this idea of, we may want to take action right now. We may want the quick answer, the quick fix, the less painful, thinking about Neptune opposing Jupiter. The benefics are in opposition. This may not be the time to take that immediate action. This may not be the time where we get, fortune on our side, but we can be fooled into thinking that I have found the quick answer, the quick fix, the get rich scheme or the heal this scheme. But really, Saturn's involved in all this too, which means we need to use Mercury's gift of observation and review to maybe figure out where we missed a step before, and maybe give ourselves some time to apply some Saturnian wisdom so that when we go forward, we can do it in a way that works. And I'm just going to throw out, and I'm probably giving away my tip here for the end, but that's okay because it kind of applies right now.
Yeah.
I think there's something key about the fact that Mercury's retrograde is going to be changing signs. We start off in Capricorn. What have I achieved or failed to achieve? Question mark. And it retrogrades back into Sagittarius. So I think there could be something saying, before we start saying, well, that plan worked or that plan failed, what was the motivation that put me on that path? A year ago, last year, we were having the discussion about the new moon in Sagittarius and visioning and vision questing. What was it I wanted? And so, did the path succeed in terms of the world and finance and goals, but did it get me what I wanted? If it didn't, it didn't succeed. And if it didn't succeed, was it that goal that was my fantasy, quote unquote, or was it the path I took to get there was a little more of a fantasy? Was I stacking the odds too high against me? Was I trying to do two jobs and my home and the juggling act? Did I self-sabotage? Like, was there something in the plan, the execution of the plan that was faulty, but the goal is still a dream. The vision is still a good vision, right? I think these are two distinct questions. What is my vision? And did I execute a plan that got me there? And so there could be some like re-sitting with those ideas. And it's okay to be like, what my vision was a year ago isn't the vision that sustains me today. And it might be time to change that, or it might be time to go back to that. I think these are questions that take time. Thank you, Saturn. To sit with and to ponder and to allow ourselves to really process deeply before we start planning for next year. And for next year, you had mentioned about, our goal in January won't be the same goal as now. And I agree. But thinking about the pattern, the path of the retrograde of Mercury, I'm just going to throw out that it isn't until the middle of January that retrograde has already gone direct, but it isn't until the middle of January that it's gone direct and transitioned back into Capricorn. And it's actually not until I think the 21st of January that it's transitioned far enough to get past that 8 degrees and out of its post shadow. So it could very well be that a lot of our goal setting is going to be more productive if we wait to the end of next month rather than trying to get a head start and get it all done now.
Yeah, true. So is that your tip for the episode?
My tip is to make it shorter, yes, but to summarize it shorter, concisely, my tip is to sit with what were your goals, your dreams, your visions last year, and do they still sustain you, or is it time for a new vision now? And try to resist the urge to criticize what happened, the execution of it. Leave that for later, for when we get into Capricorn energy. Just sit with what was your vision a year ago? What was the light and the darkness that guided you? And is that still your guide? And if not, what is your guide now? That's where I'll be sitting over this lunation.
So my tip is kind of maybe two combined. So what you mentioned, The Wizard of Oz, one of my favorite musicals of all time, one of the favorite movies of all time. Wizard of Oz and actually Wicked.
Yes.
And love what you brought up about that little man, in the back, kind of creating the whole persona. This is where we're talking about that fake mask. This is what we mean. We're seeing the big and powerful Wizard of Oz. What it is, it's a little person pulling strings, and little doing little tricks to project that persona onto us. And I think, again, going back to the tip for this new moon, if you have time during the Christmas time to watch that musical from that perspective, and I would recommend both The Wizard of Oz and Wicked, which is the story of the Bad Witch, before she obviously got killed, in The Wizard of Oz. Watch that from that perspective. Where is your heart? Where is your courage? Where's your brain? Do you choose your own path? And to add to that, this is the kind of the two-level tip for the month, is what we were talking about, spiritual crisis, and what you said, Kimberly, you had a power all along, my dear. Those two quotes, where is it that you have that spiritual crisis? Is your yellow brick road that you're going through on your spiritual crisis, to find your brain, to find your courage, to find friends, to find the meaning? Are you going to that temple of false pretense, and do you have the courage and the brains to go back behind that curtain and see how actually it's played? What is it behind it? It takes courage for us to face our spiritual gurus, our teachers, our politicians, and actually see they're not who we think they are. It takes a lot of courage to really admit that to yourself. So I would say this would be my tip for this month. Have a look at those movies, have time with the cup of cocoa, and think about what that movie really means. Journal on that. Where is your courage? Where is your meaning? where is that power that you all along had? And is that big and powerful Wizard of Oz in your life, however you define that, telling you that, you need him? Are you actually following the path because you don't believe in your own power? And I think, again, just going back to our political landscape at the moment, I think a lot of people feel disempowered by those big and powerful wizards, and is that true? Or have we had the power all along?
I love it. Perfect note to end on. It feels very uplifting and Sagittarian.
I'm hoping it is. So we will see you all at the full moon episode, full moon in on December 27. And until then, enjoy your winter solstice, enjoy your Christmas, enjoy the festivities if you do celebrate. And I hope you well.
Bye. Thank you for joining us in this week's Astro Chat. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion and would love to hear about anything that resonated with you. Keep the conversation going by posting shareable content on our Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube pages. You can also email us at astrochatpodcast@gmail.com. AstroChat is uploaded every 2 weeks on the Saturday before each new and full moon. Look for us on your favorite podcast platform as well as on YouTube. You can support AstroChat and receive exclusive content by donating on our Patreon page. We look forward to chatting with you all again at the next lunation of the moon.